let's bisect an angle. So this is another construction. So we're going to use our compass and our straight edge. I actually really like this one. This is one of my favorite ones. And we're just going to follow these steps. Step 1, we're going to draw an angle such as angle A. Well, guess what? I've already done it for you down here. Place the compass at A. So that means that your compass point here goes at A. And we're going to draw an arc that intersects both sides of the angle, just like this picture here. Okay, so I'm just going to draw an arc that intersects both sides. Then it says to label the intersections B and C, just like the picture above. So the top one is C, the bottom one is B. Now, step 2 says to place the compass at C and draw an arc. Then place the compass at point B. Using the same radius, draw another arc. So from C out here, I'm going to draw an arc. So I'm going to choose some radius. Make sure that you're at least halfway. Okay, I could be a little bit smaller. So now I'm going to choose some radius. So that's the radius. I'm not going to change it now, okay? I'm going to do this for the rest of the time. So I'm going to draw an arc out here with my compass point at C. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with my compass point at B. Okay, label the intersection G. Just like that picture shows, I'm going to label this intersection right here G. I'm going to use my straight edge now to draw a ray through AG. So I'm drawing a ray from A through G. Now, ray AG is bisecting angle CAB, or angle A. So I can show that by putting little arcs right here. Those are congruent.